Serenbe is a place where the innate connections humans have with nature and all living things is celebrated through work and play. And we're here to tell the stories of those who have been inspired by this biophilic way of life in our community and across the country. This is Serenbe Stories. Today we're talking with Bill Browning and Catie Ryan from Terrapin Bright Green. Bill Browning is one of the green building and real estate industry's foremost thinkers and strategists and an advocate for sustainable design solutions. As co-founder of Terrapin, he is no stranger to biophilic design. He's worked with the Pentagon, Starwood Hotels, Google, the City of New York, Rocky Mountain Institute, among others. Did you know that Catie joined Terrapin in 2008? She's their director of projects and also the co-author of multiple books, including the 14 Patterns of Biophilic Design and the Economics of Biophilia, which is a leading piece in the industry for case studies when designing with nature in mind. It's been more than 20 years since Steve Nygren met Bill Browning and was introduced to the concept of biophilia. In today's episode, we talk about their early connections, major influences in the green building industry, and in developing Serenbe. Bill and Catie and Bill's zebra finches share their stories, their work at Terrapin that furthers research in biophilic design and also discusses their new book, Nature Inside, a Biophilic Design Guide, which we highly recommend and is out now. But first, Serenbe Stories is brought to you by The Inn at Serenbe. The Inn is nestled in the rolling countryside of bucolic Serenbe, where guests can walk on the 15 miles of trails through preserved forest land, the wildflower meadow, and the animal village. You can relax by the pool, hot tub, or in rocking chairs on the wraparound porch. Play on the croquet lawn, swings, and in-ground trampolines. Connect with nature and each other, all while staying in luxurious rooms on the inn grounds or within the community of Serenbe. Book your stay today at serenbeinn.com. Well, I want to welcome everybody back. And today we've got Steve Nygren as usual. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Good morning, everyone.
And our guests today are Bill Browning and Catie Ryan of Terrapin Bright Green. How are you guys?
Very well, thanks.
Morning.
Well, we really appreciate you guys coming to us via Zoom, as usual in this current times. And Steve's actually in Colorado on a trip. So we're all in different places, but we're all coming together to talk about your background, your relationship, as well as your new book that's coming out, which actually I should say right now coming out this September, but by the time this airs, it will be out and everybody can go get it, called Nature Inside, and we'll talk about that a little bit more today. The first thing I'm always curious about when we have our guests is sort of what is your Serenbe story? And so, Bill, I know you and Steve have known each other, I think, for over 15 years, that maybe started with the Rocky Mountain Institute. So I'd love to hear how you came into our world and how you guys got to know each other.
20 years next month, Bill.
More than 20 years, actually.
Yeah.
So our mutual friend, Ray Anderson, who was the founder of Interface, the carpet company, introduced us. We had a series of meetings at Serenbe when Serenbe was the bed and breakfast, and we were exploring sustainability issues for Interface. And so that's how we got to meet Steve. And not long after one of those sessions, one of Steve's neighbors was plowing down the trees, and Steve was freaking out and decided he needed to protect the land, bought the land surrounding him, and then had to figure out what to do. And so Ray suggested that our crew from Rocky Mountain Institute come do a workshop with Steve and crew to explore what could be done on that place. That was 2000.
That's right.
Wow.
In September 2000, 20 years ago next month.
That's incredible. And had you heard of the Rocky Mountain Institute before, Steve, through the work that you'd done, or was this sort of a new?
Oh, no, absolutely. Because as Bill said, Ray used Serenbe as his sort of base for a lot of these think tank meetings. So the whole crew they had been coming since, mid to late 90s, right? When did you start working with Ray, Bill?
It was 95.
Yeah, as I was saying. So it was several years, but, it was just, through Ray's friends. Ray really connected us with the thought leaders, and that circle still isn't nearly as big as it is. But back in 1995, 96, it was a small circle of people that were really concerned about all these issues.
Right. Well, and now you guys are on the Biophilic Institute board together,
Right.
along with Ray's daughter, Harriet, which is great. One of the things that I think that's interesting about the Rocky Mountain Institute compared to other institute is you guys kind of think of it as a think and a do tank. Bill, talk a little bit about that. Like most foundations or institutes sort of are more research based, but tell me about the do part of the institute. And was that an example of when you came to Serenbe of the do?
Rocky Mountain Institute, yeah, we did basic research on energy policy, community economic development, agriculture systems, transportation, and it wasn't enough just to do policy work. We got questions about how could we help people, and so we ran economic development programs in rural communities whose economies had faltered or had become dependent on now abandoned coal mines, and we worked with car companies. We got a lot of questions from architects. And so I went off to MIT and did a real estate degree and came back in 1991. We started a real estate consulting group called Green Development Services. It was one of the first green building consulting practices. We also worked with companies. And so not long after Paul Hawkins started working with Ray Anderson was when we got asked to join in the conversation at Interface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how did you get into this world of sort of green? Was this something as a kid you were interested? Did you study it before you went back to school, or did you come in it through sort of design and architecture?
My mom says I was always interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
She reminds me that the very first adult book that I bought with my own money was Joy Adamson's Born Free.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
And my hero growing up was Jacques Cousteau. So, yeah, I guess always. I went to design school in Boulder, same place Steve went, University of Colorado Boulder. It was one of the few programs that did environmental design. And so not only did we study architecture, but also landscape architecture and town planning and solar policy and environmental psychology, really amazing sort of diverse background. When I was there, Amory and Hunter Lovins came to teach a summer course, and so I studied with them, and then after that was one of the volunteers on the construction of their house, an old snowmass. Across the street from them was John Denver's foundation, Windstar, 1,000-acre site, and they were getting ready to build a new greenhouse with Buckminster Fuller. And I had just done my architectural history thesis and was working on a huge solar greenhouse project in Boulder.
Oh my gosh.
And so when I graduated, I moved up there to work on that project and was with Windstar for a number of years, and then moved across the street to Rocky Mountain Institute.
Wow, that's incredible. Like that must have been one of like the final Buckminster projects.
It was his last building.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was his last project.
I never heard that story, that piece, all these years.
That's a good one.
Now, when did you first run into Phil Tabb around Boulder?
So Phil was teaching at the University of Colorado the same time that I was a student there. And I knew Phil, but I never took any classes with him. He was, in particular, he was working on a book with a number of friends of mine on planning communities for solar access, which is still one of the best books on that topic. And so I knew Phil from them, but I never studied with Phil.
Amazing. So for all of our listeners, and Bill is the person who introduced us to Phil Tabb. And so we can thank Bill for all the great land planning we have at Serenbe, because it's that connection that brought the Serenbe story forward.
That's incredible.
Phil's known for sort of three topics, especially four now. The first was solar design and planning for solar. The second was sacred architecture and underlying principles that are used traditionally in design of sacred architecture around the world. And also the formation of how land planning was done historically in England and the formation of English villages and what physical form they take. And so what you see at Serenbe is really all of those things put together.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And I know he's got his new book out that also focuses on biophilic design, but much more of a research tome than more what you guys are doing, which I think is more for the general public, obviously designers and architects as well. But I want to bring Catie in and find out, you've been working at Terrapin Bright Green, so maybe we can touch on sort of the inspiration and how that company came to be, Bill, and then kind of how you came into the fold, Catie, and what you're working on. Bill, you want to tell us about Terrapin to start?
Sure. I left Rocky Mountain Institute in 2004 to be the director of design for a new town that was being built in Virginia, a new urbanist community designed by Duane Platters-Ibrick. We got the town designed, approved, financed. We're selling lots of home builders and beginning construction, and the families that owned it imploded, few spectacular divorces, and the project came to a halt. And so I went back to consulting, and in 2006, friends of mine in New York, Rick Cook and Bob Fox, who were designing the Bank of America Tower, were getting lots of requests for green building consulting, and I said, we don't have time for that. And so we formed the firm together, Terrapin Bright Green, in 2006.
Okay, that's great. And Catie, how long have you been there? I want to say you started in 2008, so pretty much at the inception. But tell us how your background and how you stumbled upon Bill and why, why you do what you do.
Yeah, well, I joined Bill and the team in 2008, July 2008. I was actually in the midst, just previous to that, I was doing graduate work in Mexico on green infrastructure in the town of San Miguel de Allende. So they were in the midst of applying for World Heritage Site designation, and they had a serious stormwater management problem and a lot of overdevelopment and a depleting aquifer. So they were trying to figure out, I was working with the architects in the Department of Environment and Zoning to figure out how to develop differently. And so we came up with a micro watershed strategy to approach development. But that work down there, as well as other work in through my graduate program at Brandeis, that I really became interested in urban green development. And so when I was in Mexico, I started a job search, and I came across Terrapin randomly. And this is it. This is what I want to do. This is the company that I need to work for. And I basically said, if I don't get this job, I'm going to stop looking until after I graduate, because I can't write a thesis and do my job and look for a new job at the same time. But this was too good to be, to let pass. And so I pursued that. And unusual for the times, it was just a phone interview. We had 2 phone interviews, and they offered me the job while I was in Mexico, which may not seem that strange now, I guess, because of all this Zoom activity. But back then, you really, the in-person interview was really critical. So they hired me or they offered me the job, and I guess it's like the end of February, beginning of March of 2008. And I didn't even meet them until April, and I didn't start my job until July. So it was a lot, just the right time for all of us, I suppose. Everything came together. And so from then I've been engrossed in whatever Terrapin had to throw at me. I spent the first year working on algae-based biofuel research, which was not what I had planned on doing, but it was fascinating. And that was with the NRDC. And then after that project was over, got more into building and planning projects. And I've been with them ever since. And Biophilia comes into the story through Bill again. And I kind of fell into it because that's where I was and the opportunity that was provided to me. But background to that, my undergrad degree was in graphic design and arts. So I was already in the art realm, but after several years of being a professional designer, I really felt like something was missing, and I needed more like some social impact. And of course, I had always been an outdoorsy person, so that's kind of how I ended up. I mean, that's a very short story to how I ended up where I am now, but it was I felt like I was late in the game, but at the same time now it's just part of what we do and who I am. So it's been a great journey.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. And as you were talking, I was thinking, the word biophilia, like, that came into my lexicon only through Steve and maybe 5 or 6 years ago, which seems like a time ago. And as a marketer, I thought, what a gobbledygook. What word is that? Like, I don't know. I can't say it. I can't pronounce it. I don't know how to spell it. Like, that's never going to take off, and so over time, obviously, repetition is important, but, I'm like a huge believer now in it. So like, Catie, where did that come into your life? Because it sounds like maybe Bill and Steve, this is just sort of, it's been with them forever. But like, is this something that Terrapin brought to you? Was it something that you studied at all? I mean, it's a really fascinating concept.
Well, actually, I think that your experience that you just described is actually pretty common, not just for I mean, when I got this job and I told my family and people, what I was doing, they were more excited that I was coming back to the Northeast than the fact that I had this particular kind of job. People were calling me tree hugger, and they were, the green stuff's a trend or fad, it'll end. And I kind of ignored them and just did what I wanted to do. And then slowly people would start to send me news articles. Oh, we saw this thing about like solar energy in the news and we thought of you. Okay. And slowly like they'd be saving me more articles or sending me things. And then I started getting requests for, I'm remodeling my home. What should I do if I want to save some energy, or, my kids are going to be living in this space. I don't want any toxins. And so like it just increased, and to the point now where people get it. So in my family, at least. So the biophilia thing is a little bit like that, but I didn't, with my family, at least, I didn't try explaining it too much until now, until there's something that they can hold and see and read and process themselves. But I'd say it's been 10 years. Back in 2009 or 2010 is when, I think it was 2010, Bill, when we started talking about biophilia more intently at Terrapin. And it might have been around the time that Delos was making a request for more information on how nature might benefit, designs of nature or landscape community planning might influence their approach to new development. And so that's when we look back at old spreadsheets on the research that had been done in the 80s and 90s on things that we now associate with biophilic design, like lighting and views to nature and things like that, like the early research. And so one of my first jobs within the realm of biophilia was to evolve that spreadsheet into something much more robust and current. And so that was my true introduction to it. Reading a lot of the journal articles and reaching out to the researchers to find out what the current thinking is on this. And so that was in 2010. And then I think Bill's story around the book Biophilic Design and pursuing interest, funding, investment in early biophilic design projects is what kickstarted Terrapin's services on that topic. Maybe Bill, you'd like to indulge us.
Yeah.
Now, Bill, you first introduced me to the concept at the charrette 20 years ago, but where were you first introduced to it?
Judy Herwagen. Judy Herwagen, the environmental psychologist from the University of Washington and the U.S. General Services Administration, was the person who introduced me to biophilia. So in the mid-90s at Rocky Mountain Institute, we were working on a book on green real estate that was eventually published and called Green Development. And it was the process of green real estate. And while we were pulling together case studies, we were finding these amazing examples of really big jumps in productivity. And we couldn't find anything in the literature about it. And we had two different groups finding this stuff. There was another group at Rocky Mountain Institute that was working on energy efficiency in industry, and we're finding these huge jumps. And we found that most of these things had never been published. And so we pulled them together into a publication called Greening the Building and the Bottom Line. It was published in December of 94, January 95. It generated a lot of interest. We got like 500 articles in Good Morning America and Wall Street Journal and all sorts of stuff. My co-author, Joe Rome, left the Institute not long after that and joined the Clinton administration in the Department of Energy in the Research and Finance Division, and he on energy efficiency and renewables. And we decided, wouldn't it be great if we could actually study, rather than just having these anecdotal or these case studies that we had where we had good solid numbers, but do an actual experiment to see, would a green building increase productivity? Bill McDonough had just finished designing a new factory for Herman Miller, the furniture company. And they were moving 700 people out of a windowless box to an adjoining site, this beautifully daylit building that was surrounded by a restored prairie and water features. And 700 people, that was a good chunk of folks to be able to study to see, was there any gain in productivity associated with this new facility? And what was great was it was known population and nothing management-wise was changing, just the building. And so Joe had funding to support that research and brought together a number of folks from the federal laboratories, one of whom was Judy Herwagen. And in forming the research hypothesis for what might lead to a gain in productivity in that facility, Judy introduced the concept of biophilia. Now, we were thinking daylight and the access to daylight was the thing that made the difference. And partway through the experiment, we were all a little perplexed because we saw an overall gain in productivity in the whole facility, but we didn't see a gain in productivity across all the shifts. We had a big gain in productivity in the daytime, mixed results in the swing shift, and no gain in productivity in the nighttime shift. And what we eventually came to realize was the difference was because the level of lighting was the same in all the shifts, but the nighttime folks couldn't see the landscape outside. couldn't see the beautiful prairie landscape with all the flowers and the butterflies and the birds and the water features. And so suddenly that really clicked. This connection to nature may be, really fundamental and might be a really good way to think about how we add to people's well-being. So our crew at Rocky Mountain Institute, with interns and others, started this spreadsheet that Catie talks about, that mentioned, of trying to find every paper we could find on the topic. There weren't a lot at the time, but collecting them all together. And then one of our folks left RMI to go do a master's degree in the Yale School of Forestry, Ben Shepard, who's now at Talia 10, and took the spreadsheet with him because he was going to be working with Stephen Kellert. And then Ben and a number of other students and Stephen expanded that spreadsheet, which I eventually, years later, came back to me, and that's the one that Catie expanded again. And we did it again for the book.
Okay.
Actually, we did it again in 2012.
Yep.
Yes. Well, you did the Economics of Biophilia. Is that the book?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that. So I'm assuming all of, the prior research kind of got expanded or crystallized into that piece. Mm-hmm. Is that a book that you feel like the Economics of Biophilia kind of, you distilled down all of those learnings?
Yeah, that one was important. That Chris Garvin, our former business partner, who's now at Google, Chris was the one who said, we really need to do this. And it was largely because we were having conversations with clients and potential clients about biophilia, and they get really excited and their heads would nod up and down and, wow, this is really nice. But we couldn't get them beyond this is really nice. We needed to be able to show them that, hey, it's not just nice. There are really big numbers associated with this. Mm-hmm. That's the basis of the Economics of Biophilia, which is in the midst of Dakota Walker, our colleague, is in the midst of leading a complete rewrite, a new edition of it.
Oh.
That was 2012, and a lot's happened since 2012. So that will be our next book.
That's great. I mean, just to tie that to Serenbe, Steve and I were having a conversation with a podcast, another group yesterday, and, the economics, it really is, we can think that these are nice things to have, but you really do have to prove the economics, right, Steve? I mean, you have had to do that over and over again.
Because we have a general perception that it's more expensive, and at one period in time it maybe was. But the ongoing problem I find is they continue to measure in silos, and you cannot, in the silos, it doesn't always work out. You have to look at the entire project to see where the cost savings actually are.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily right up front either. Those cost savings happen over time.
Well, exactly. Times we found this especially with the geothermal solar, the demonstration house we had with Bosch, and most of these companies still look at the energy savings. For instance, if you're talking about just energy, and how the savings is over time, and they don't look at the cost of money. And actually, if you're looking at cash flow, it's month one on these projects because of the cost of money, if you factor that in. And we still have to have a good economic measurement against health. And so once you add energy and health savings, it becomes an absolute. Why would we do it any other way? But we continue to look at silos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The 2012 publication, Economics of Biophilia, was a pivotal moment for us in getting buy-in and interest and just being able to talk about it. People were much more receptive. Mm-hmm.
In fact, the response to that was a good friend, an old friend who was doing sustainability consulting for and helping run a lot of that for Google, came to us and said, Mary Davidge, and said, hey, this is really interesting. We know you guys have been talking about some patterns around this. Our culture is you have to have the science before you can have the conversation. So we want you to take 2 or 3 of your proposed patterns and run the science to ground with them and come back, and then we'll have that peer reviewed. If things look good from that, then let's have a conversation about developing an entire set of pattern language for Google's spaces and buildings. And so that was an ongoing process and Judy Heerwagen and Stephen Kellert and
Vivian Lofness.
Vivian Lofness, yeah, sorry. Yeah. And Vivian Lofness were all partners with us in that process.
That eventually led to the publication of 14 patterns of biophilic design.
That's what I was going to ask, because those Google metrics, obviously Google being a huge company and then you guys coming in with the expertise, I'm assuming they still use all of that in any kind of their project.
They do. It's a little different than what you see in 14 patterns, because that's it's distilled down from a lot of other works, and theirs was their materials were designed or developed specifically for their culture and the way they develop. So, but we went on to develop other tools for them to integrate biophilic design for their projects specifically. Mm-hmm. So that went on for several years. So we've been working with them for like 8 years. On how to evolve that. And a lot of the research that we've come across over time was through their support. Like they've been very supportive in the development of this and accessibility of it to the broader design community.
So tell me how
finance seems to really drive things. And while you have some really companies that are seeing the advantages, what's happening with the real estate appraisal community? Are they taking any of this into consideration in appraisals? Because that's what's really going to drive major changes.
This is a conversation that Judy Heerwagen and I've had that's kind of funny, is that back up, real estate appraisals have always taken this in. So a classic example would be, and it's one that we write about, is if you look at the real estate values in Seattle, and folks have a view to Lake Union, the hillside above Lake Union. A house with partial water view is significantly more expensive per square foot than a house with no view. A house with full water view is like 58% per square foot more expensive than no view. And a house on the water is 137% more expensive than a house on that same hillside with no water view. Right?
Mm-hmm. I'm with you.
So there's also
the totals are the same.
That's been done on height of buildings and views, and that the pricing of condo units as you go up higher and have a better view actually increases in most buildings, right? So this is something we've already been valuing, just not explicitly calling it biophilia.
Well, but I agree with you, but some of that same concept was true with the values for golf course lots, and it was about view and daylights. It didn't look at the whole picture again.
Yep. Right. So, it's similar to early green building stuff. Early on, the appraisal folks had a hard time appraising it. And so you had to get them to look at at a number of different things, the energy savings, the net operating income differences, and capitalizing those things. Sometimes it's hard to assign the health improvements directly to the economics of a building unless you're a corporation or a company or a factory.
Or a very targeted population.
Yeah. Or a hospital.
Yeah.
Right. It's harder to do a study house by house versus you've got everybody in one Googleplex, if you will, or Herman Miller factory.
Right. But the benefit also, I mean, if you really want to get into it, the benefits differ for females versus males. People who are 80 versus 18. So there's a lot of other factors to consider. So you can't necessarily, while there are certain universals truths to this, there's also, you can't make certain assumptions about benefit when you're talking about such a disparate or diverse group of people.
Why do you think? Because so the LEED and now we have sort of this but these certifications for commercial have really taken on importance, and some of them are almost if you're going to build a tower, like of course you're going to use a sort of a LEED system, and I think the green building, years back really sort of incorporated all that and pushed it, but we don't have it, kind of to Steve's point, in the residential real estate at this point. All of our homes are Earthcraft certified, which is the South Face group. I guess Energy Star might be the most consumer friendly term. We think about, what's the consumer demanding, right? Versus, I, as an employee, am maybe not demanding to live or to work in a LEED certified building, but it's coming down from the top, right? But residential real estate kind of starts at the bottom, right? I have to decide or demand that I want an Energy Star or an Earthcraft house. There's very few, and I guess there's more and more developers who are saying everything has to be Earthcraft. I'm seeing more and more geothermal. But do you guys see something like that could be not a designation? I don't feel like we need another certification, but do you feel like there can be a demand created for a biophilic, house or a biophilic life that we can demand as consumers? Do you see that as a future?
Yes.
There's a silver lining to this pandemic. It is the very that. People may not be tagging it, but it's all of these issues that people have suddenly realized are important. And I think this is moving the conversation forward.
I would say that people have expectations or demands that already exist, like, living a healthy lifestyle, fitness, being able to have outdoor space. So it could be more of how you frame those opportunities, and it may in fact result in a biophilic home. So having a place to retire to, or, read your book and not be disrupted, or still have a great view outside, like that, those are just characteristics of a space. So the solution is going to vary for each individual or family depending on their needs. But I think even in some of the earlier, or within the last 10 years, I guess, Bill, can you, is it the Solaire or the Visionaire maybe in Lower Manhattan, where their families were buying in because they were able to tie their children's health benefits to the quality of the building? I mean, that's more of an indoor air quality issue, but it's the same general idea, right? It's their priorities are being realized through the design.
Yeah, the Solaire was the first green high-rise residential building in the U.S., and it did wind up capturing a rent premium. And what really took off was a newspaper article where they interviewed some families, and one of the families said, prior to living in this building, we had a child who couldn't sleep through the night because of respiratory problems. And once we moved in here, those went away. We went on vacation and stayed in some conventional places, and the kid got sick again. We came home, and within a few days, the kid was sleeping through the night again. That one newspaper article shifted the whole market perception of I think both Steve and Catie nailed it, and that is, particularly now when so many families have been having to shelter in place, be at home for extended periods of time. I think people are becoming much more aware of sort of the impact of their surroundings on them. And so that opens an opportunity for a new conversation about biophilia. And one of the things in Terrapin's new book we look at a whole bunch of the different sort of green building rating systems, and almost every one of them out there now has some component or is developing some component around biophilia as part of the rating.
They don't always call it that, but they often do. So it's more a matter of the approach the team or the client wants to take to realize that goal.
Well, and that's a perfect lead in for the book. And so the book, is called Nature Inside. And it really talks about, right, the key benefits, the principles, and really what is biophilic design. And you have illustrations, right, of how that can be implemented in interiors, tons of case studies, different scales, different typologies. But tell us a little bit about it. Like, how did you guys come together? Obviously, Terrapin has been prolific at, research and writing, but this feels like maybe, it was just in Dwell. Like, is this the most consumer friendly book, do you think, to date, or maybe broad interest? Because I'm very excited to dig into it.
Well, actually, for years, people have asked us when we're going to write a book. Like, the Economics of Biophilia is a great resource, but it's not, it's self-published. 14 Patterns, also great research for a design community, but it's self-published. So people have been asking, when are you going to publish a book? And, a lot of it has to do just having the time to make that happen. And you never really have the time unless you make it, so, but this kind of fell in our lap. And Bill, I'm not sure. Do you know how?
We got contacted by the Royal Institute of British Architects. Right. Who said, we want to, one of the editors said, I want to commission a book on biophilic design and interiors. And would you guys do it, or who would you say should write this book? And I thought about it, and I came in and talked with Catie and her team and said, you guys are going to kill me, but I think we have to write this.
He did actually say that. I think you're going to kill me. But do you, I think we asked them how they, where they heard about the topic or what possessed them to reach out to us in the first place. And that they didn't really, I think it was something that was probably brewing, for a while within. And so, I was very reluctant because I knew that this was going to be a huge time commitment, but we knew it was important. And we were excited to do it too. It was just making the actual commitment made it a real thing. So there was some negotiation around what the book should include, how focused on the interiors versus other topics. And so we struck a nice balance, I think, with the book where, it is focused on the interiors primarily, but a lot of the principles and ideas, they can be applied to anything, whether it's the interior space, the architecture itself, landscape, community, and so on. And we do have a chapter that addresses outside the building. But I treated it like a project. It was the only way to get this, get it done. So it was about a year and a half in the making.
Yeah, it's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Well, and again, like, thrilled to see it in Dwell, because the more that we can get the words out there and people to really understand that it is accessible, that they can incorporate it into their lives. Tell us a little bit what the reaction has been so far. I mean, I know it's not quite out publicly. It will be when this airs, but what are you hearing from people?
People seem really excited. Bill, I think you've talked to more people in recently and gotten responses from them.
Yeah, my favorite was from Rick Fedrizzi, the former chair of the U.S. Green Building Council and the head of the Well Building Institute. And Rick's comment was, "It's beautiful." And that's one of the things we really were happy about, was that our AABA made the commitment to do full color throughout. And so it's filled with photographs.
Mm-hmm.
And we start at the scale of individual objects, so fabric and hardware and furniture and finishes, before we even jump into spaces, just some of those smaller pieces that anybody could add to their own home. And then move from there to residential and hotels and hospitals and schools and factories and office buildings and civic buildings. And so really exploring that. And we have appendices that are really a toolkit to help people think through how to apply and tools to help them with the application of biophilic design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the book was supposed to have about 100 photos. I think if you include everything, it probably has about 260. I'm not sure. And RIBA was great. They didn't ask us to cut back, and it was hard enough to limit because there's so many other projects that we could have included in photos and. Mario, that's for second edition. Like we'll have to save that one for later. Yeah. So it was a fun process thinking, and it was actually really helpful to break it down and think about it different spaces, like what, without repeating ourselves, because a lot of these ideas could be applied to any type of interiors. But then we got, okay, how does this space or what's important to a residential interior than compared to, say, a community center. So the book gets into a little bit about, for each space type, what are the important health considerations or experiential modes that you want to be in or to provide in this space type. So for each chapter, we have a little bit of a history and then a little bit of the design impact opportunity specific to that interior type. And so that's kind of the structure of the book after that first couple chapters that introduce the topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think we're all trying to figure out how do we upgrade? We're, trapped in our house all day. What are we going to upgrade? What are we going to change? So it's probably going to be a really great tool to inspire people and also some practical applications for obviously professionals, but I always think of from the consumer facing.
Sure. The books that we've produced in the past that we've published ourselves have been, while anybody could read it and use it, they were geared towards particular audiences. This book in particular, while it will appeal to the architects and interior designers, is very digestible to anybody.
Great.
The case studies are written to really be something that people can process and recognize how this might be applicable to their own space or project.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, I wanted to ask sort of as a final wrap-up question, with all of the incredible work that both of you guys have done, and obviously, this wonderful new, design guide, what are you guys looking towards? And that could be a project you're working on, and you can both answer this separately. Or, what are you really hoping for sort of, there's a lot that we're hoping for the future right now, but really more from in your world in biophilia, where you see things going over the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years. And obviously things have been accelerated quite a bit now, but I'd love your sort of put your futurist hat on, and what would you hope to see, or what do you think is going to happen?
I can jump in on some of the stuff. We've been doing some fundraising. We really would like to do some direct neuroscience experiments to gauge how people are responding to stuff, using eye tracking mechanisms, using some of the advanced EEG experiments as well to watch the brainwave patterns. We did, and it's in the book, and also on our website, we did with Jim Detterman, an architect out of Baltimore, Morgan State University, and the neuroscience team at Salk. We did a year-long experiment in a classroom in inner city Baltimore, looking at use of carpet, wallpaper, window blinds, ceiling tiles that had biomorphic or fractal patterns in them, to see did that improve the learning environment for the students. And we saw a dramatic increase in academic performance. And we also have 4 months of data on improved stress recovery of the students using that classroom as well. we'd like to see more of that, more post-occupancy work. We're moving in to do more work in hospitality as well, and hotel design and hotels, and both the conversation about biophilic experiences, but also thinking about hotels as this amazing economic engine that it touches a whole bunch of different parts of a community. And in particular, we're pretty fascinated by this idea of, can a hotel become the hub for resilience for a community? And we've seen bits and pieces of that, but we'd kind of like to pull that together to have a larger conversation. Because particularly when you're operating a hotel, you get into food systems and laundry and support and engineering and energy systems, and you get into a whole bunch of other stuff that other building types, other than maybe a hospital, never do. And so we're really fascinated as hotels as potential engines for change around sustainability and biophilia and resilience for communities.
That's fascinating.
And, you know, you look at the number of people that come through a hotel and expose them, and many of them are change makers, influencers, and you start getting that repeat. You also start putting the economics to it. So I think that's a brilliant place to really have a demonstration.
Yeah, and we want to go to hotels.
Yeah, so I'm right there with Bill on the direction that we want to go and that we see things going, but also just from specifically with respect to biophilic design, I'm interested in seeing it at the larger scale, and how we think about biophilia and the biophilic experience with respect to ecosystem services, and how we treat and design our landscapes and the communities, and how that might influence how we design our buildings, because the biophilic experience is not just about the interior space, how the exterior might influence your experience of the interiors, and that transition between the indoors and outdoors and so on. And that can be done through the hospitality concept we're talking about. It's part of that. Public health resilience. I think there's a lot of ways that you can spin it.
No, I think that's incredible. I mean, just the placement on the land of anything is always so important that we don't think of, right? We don't think of that, how that benefits us. Was there anything else that you guys want to add that we didn't cover?
The book is available starting Tuesday.
Great. So the book is available when this comes out. You can buy it anywhere, I'm assuming.
I'd say go to Amazon or the RIBA website, and those are the best places to start.
Okay, perfect.
Or your local bookstore.
Hopefully, yes.
I know. Ours.
And everyone needs to know our bookstore at Serenbe is a New York reporting bookstore. So orders through there always help move it up the list.
Thank you.
Well, we would love to have you guys here once everybody can travel again safely. You know that Serenbe is always welcoming. Love authors, would love to help promote the book, and we'll definitely be sharing it out and want to amplify it. And just thank you so much for your time. This has been completely interesting and really an honor to have both of you on the podcast.
It's been great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Steve.
Yeah. So the full title is Nature Inside, a Biophilic Design Guide, published by the Royal Institute of British Architects. And we're thrilled to be able to talk about it with you all today.
Is it going to be in another language? Is that already in the works?
One can only hope, yes.
And we'll put everything up on the website and tag everything and direct you guys to Terrapin and the book and everything. So thank you guys so much.
Very exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks and congratulations.
Thank you for listening to Serenbe Stories. New episodes are available on Mondays. Please rate and review the podcast and visit our website to learn more about upcoming guests, episodes, and everything Biophilia at serenbestories.com.